Welcome to yet another video on Java and related videos. Today we are going to discuss about 10 most common mistakes a Java developer does and how you can avoid them. Okay, so basically this is about not only like you are preparing for an interview or whether you are learning the language or you have been experienced Java developer. This video is about how we can avoid the common mistakes and how we can deal with it. Okay, so I've seen many developers throughout my career doing these mistakes, and one or other things is actually left out by them and they ignore this, right? So this is my video to those people or those helpful people which will make them understand or to never make that mistakes. Okay, and also the people who are new to the industry will avoid this. Okay, so let's jump into the video. The very first and the very common mistakes a newcomer or an exact, I mean, the developer does, right, is that he never checks the null, right? So basically, he neglects it, right? So there has been many null pointer exception. Your application is running up, and suddenly null pointer exception comes, and your application gets stopped up, and you get ejected the log at the tech stack, and you found out that there is a null pointer exception, and you are completely blown up, saying that how did I did that mistake, right? So there are many occasions like you just try to ignore, or you never seen that particular code, right? So to avoid this, what you can do is that you have to always check for the null before you're trying to access it. Okay, whenever you're trying to apply any dot or any extension, or you're trying to run any access any variable or methods, call any methods, right? You use this. And there has been, after Java 8, there has been a better way to handle null pointer exception, that is optional. Okay, so this will give you a far better way to handle nulls. So with null, you can handle it very elegantly, and there are different ways to handle it. Whether you wanted to, whether you have a null check and then you found it is a null, right? You can also do some other things that like or else, right? Or you can also choose to throw some exceptions, or else like throw such kind of things. Or let's say you wanted to identify if that is an empty or not, right? So there are whole different of methods which are provided. Okay, so which will give you a better way to handle it. Okay, so you will check off nullable. There are different methods. There are if present, right? So there are n number of methods which are provided, which can which your code will look good, and also it will be clear and concise. Okay, so this is one of the common mistake, and I hope you here on avoid this particular mistakes. Hard coding values, right? So this is also one of the important mistakes which a Java developer does, and it's quite, actually I would say, let's say the hard coding thing is quite easy to do it, and like you never know where did you did the mistake. You will start checking the code, but ultimately it's written directly in your code, and it like you at the end when you're running your application, you are stumbled up that where did I make the mistake, right? So but the disadvantages about this is that when you're hard coding something, it makes your code less maintainable. The main purpose, like if you see Java itself, it's one of the important purpose of making it is reusability, one of the important feature of it, right? So hard coding will make your application less maintainable, less reusable, right? So instead of using the hard coded value, you can use the constants, you can use some configuration files, the environment variables. Okay, so this will make your life easy, and also it's writing one location, and then it will be available throughout your application. So it's quite easy to fix something, and also it's very easy to make the changes at one place. Okay, so avoid writing hard-coded values like this, and use some configuration key value pair, like or static constant, right? So this will make your life easy. Okay, and also it will avoid your mistakes. Hope you got the second mistake, what the Java developer does. Now, the third mistake is uh, ignoring the exception handling scenarios. And now there are many code we write, like let's say we write methods, we write our long class, we introduce these new classes, we write new code logic, we does some logic is written inside it. And uh, the very basic thing, which is quite when you're writing certain code, right, you should be able to handle the exceptions, right? And you never know the code you are writing, right? There might be an exception which be thrown, that whether it is checked exception, whether it is null pointer except unchecked exception, any kind of exception, right? You have to be in a position to recover your code and share some details to the user. Let's say some unexpected error is coming, you should be able to handle it. And the very basic way of handling is try, catch, and finally, right? So you write a, specific exceptions in a order. There are specific orders to be written inside it. Log like you're logging something as a message, right? Decide whether to recover or rethrow. There are some throw and throw exceptions, right? We can throw it. So there are better way to handle the exceptions, and we can use that. Okay. So this is one of the important, and let's say your code is getting reviewed, right? And compiler itself sometime imposes you to write the catch, try catch, right? So it will the code will not compile, it will ask you to compile it, right? So you doesn't have to ignore it. And there are many cases where as we discussed earlier, the null pointer exception or any other exceptions, right, which can occur, where that may not be compared, does not imposes you strictly, but it might be a exception thrown over there. Okay, so writing a catch block will save you your application to throw an exception and stop unavoidably, right? Uh, you got this. Let's look at the fourth one. Now, static method is used for a purpose, but overusing as a disadvantage. Now, basically, if you know, the static methods are used, and it is called with the class name, right? And for some occasions, it look like it is quite beneficial to use the without instantiating. We can directly use that particular method, but if you use it overly, right, there is a dead disadvantage, right? So it's kind of utility classes which are used, but can overuse can tightly couple your code, right? So it will make it harder to test it. And when it comes to when you're writing some code, right, ultimately your goal is to test like TDD or other stuff, right? So the JUnit test case, whatever, right, it should be able to write. So writing static code will make your code uh, be a little bit tough to test it. Okay, so instead of that, you can make use of dependency injection to improve your flexibility of the maybe it will directly, like loosen your tight coupling thing, right? So make use of Spring framework, Spring Boot, right, where you can actually inject it with the injection uh, with the getter injection, setter injection, constructor injection, whatever injection, the way of mechanism you can use it so that it's not tightly coupled. Okay, so avoid using much of the static. I am not clearly saying that you avoid static, but yeah, overusing it is quite complex. Okay, so let's look at the fifth mistake. Uh, we are not closing the resource. Now, we already spoke about try catch and exception, right? And it has been many mistakes done by the developer, that they open a resource, they forget to close it in the cache block or in the finally block, right? So not everybody remembers to close it. Now, because of that, what happens is the connection pools get exhausted. Finally your application gets shut down. There is no memory for the objects to be allocated. So there are different problems which arises when you're not closing the resources, and you're trying to initialize it but not closing or handling it, right? So you always have to close your files, the database connection pools, that will avoid your memory leaks. Okay, so the better way to handle is in Java 7 there was an introduction of try with resource statement to handle this such kind of scenarios. Automatically it will be handling it. so that even if the developer forgets it, okay, the try with resource will handle it. Okay, so whether you're opening a file, database connection, or any other things, right? So this will be taken care. Okay, so this is also one of the common mistake people does. Now, what happens is that when you're writing a Java code or any of the classes, and you're writing some logic inside it. Now, many people think of in terms of not in the design pattern, but this code is written and then it should be executing. The code which is working in any way is fine. But what happens is that if you're not writing your code in a structured manner, in a simple and clear, concise way, this can create problem in maintainability, reusability, right? So maintaining it's quite difficult. Okay, so that is the reason there are certain principles like solid principles, dry principles. There are different principles written up, so which will impose, or I would say which will require your code to be written in a clear, concise, and a simple way, so that other people can understand. Okay, so it will be better for the future people who is coming to look at the code, understand it. Okay, and then if there is a certain need for modification, they can actually write the code and do the modification. Okay, so they are not dealing with the complexity of the code, they are dealing with the simple design patterns and other principles which will make their life easy when you're trying to deal with it. Okay, so you doesn't wanted to keep your code that is not readable or understandable by the code, because what is the use of it, right? If certain enhancement comes in, right, you should be in a position to, the next person who is going to work on it, right, should be in the position to work on it. Okay, so you're not just coding for yourself, you're coding for the other people who is going to work, right, with you as a team, or the next generation who is going to work on it, right? Because there are applications who has been in the industry, in the IT industry for 15, 20 years. Like I've been working in the projects where those projects are so long that 15 years, 20 years that it has been running, right? So you have to think in that future perspective as well. Now, skipping the J unit or unit test cases, right? So, uh, very developer, what it does that they write the code, they leave that, my part is done and I'm not going to write the test cases, or just skip that writing the test cases. But if you have heard of TDD, right, and other testing uh, way, right, where you first write your test cases and then you write your original logic. But there is a certain process being followed, because there is a reason. Because what happens is that ultimately you write your code, and if it is not testable, or if it is not written in such way that it cannot be tested up, then that can be really difficult to maintain it and test it, right? And also there is a high probability that your code is not structured or not written according to the standards. Okay, so testing is not an optional thing, it's quite mandatory. And many organization, many big companies would reject your code, whatever you have written, if you're not writing your test cases and it doesn't passes. Okay, so there are certain sonar cube checks or other I would say Jenkins checks, which checks out your code is written, is writing the test cases or not. Okay, there are different the frameworks like JUnit, Mockito, PowerMock, Spy. There are different to ensure that you're writing your test cases in a proper way, and the test cases are working properly. Okay, so you make sure you write that. Okay, let's look into the eighth mistake. Now, when you're working with a multi-threading environment, like banking, telecom, and others, so there is a definitely a scenario or a location or an application code where we make use of multi-threading, the executor framework, or a synchronization code, or in a synchronization block, or a certain locks, right? We make use of it, right? So overly misusing certain threads and concurrency, it's quite might be little bit difficult to deal with, because you never know how threads will work. And there are certain uh, concurrency API where you can actually deal with the way how it can handle. But uh, threads are threads. You have to deal it in a proper way, and also you have to make use of the threads in a certain optimized way. Right? There are executor framework which will allow you for running certain threads, because it uses that kind of memory as well. It impacts the overall application performance as well. Okay, the heap memory space, etc. Right? So features like concurrency is quite complex, and also it has to be used in a certain I would say in a better way, so that it is efficient, it is quite it's solving certain purpose, not creating a problem, right? So mismanagement of this particular threads and the concurrency can lead to a deadlock in the race conditions, right? So we can use executor framework to handle threads, and there are big companies have their own frameworks to do that. But one of the important is executor framework, which can be we can introduce how many threads we can make use of, right? And that depends on the core of the system as well. Okay, so make sure you focus on that part, and when you're dealing with threads and concurrency, you make sure you have a look at it. Now, when you're writing your Java code, there is obviously some part of your code which is dealing with databases. And when you are dealing with databases, the SQL queries, JPA comes in picture, right? And there has been many occasions, there has been many developers, or it has been a long time that due to some SQL queries, some complex join, some complex query, where condition or table structures, the optimization doesn't happen, and it is not quite possible, or it is not optimized by the developer. Okay, so less experienced person, or like the person who has not worked earlier, is simply written as per his knowledge, right? And it is not efficient the way it should be written. Okay, so this might be a difficult thing when it comes to your application is running it. It is not behaving, or it is not retrieving the rows at speed it should be written, right? So make your code quite efficient. SQL queries to be written in a proper efficient way. There should be indexes. There are some other ways to do improve your performance. There are some query optimization tools also. You can make use of certain things, right? Lazy in Hibernate we're using the lazy, right? So let's say one n plus one problem. There are different ways to handle this. Okay, so make sure you are following those, and uh, kind of try to avoid too much of calling to the databases, have some indexes applied, uh, lot of things, right? So the partitioning should be there if your table is too big, right? So there are different ways to handle it. Okay, and like if you are having a columns which only requires two columns data, right? It is not better to write all star, and then it's just you just have to be very specific, so that you're not getting the whole data, and then from the table, and then you're choosing only two columns, right? This is quite uh, visible error, I would say. So avoid this. This will be better. Now now if you're following Java and you've been working for a Java for a long time, or let's say you are a fresh developer, right? Java has gone undergone many versions, revisions, right? So right from Java its start inception till date, if you see 23 version, there has been n number of versions has been released, and there are quite major releases, quite major features has been introduced. So if you directly try to learn these features, right, it might be a little bit difficult. But if you try to come up with the basics and understand the evolution from, like, Java 7, 8, 10, 11, 17, 21, these all features has got, as like the steps, right? It has been introducing quite new features, so that it's constantly evolving, constantly evolving, so that it is need of the industry, need of the security that has to be handled up, right? So it improvise it efficient, it is performance improvement, right? So also there are some security impact, which is if you are still staying on that particular old version, right? So it's better with the new version. There are new security things are handled, uh, which can less expose, and there is a less risk of exposing your code, right? So so you constantly upgrade your Java version so that you are on top of the security, you're top of on the latest benefits which are provided with the versions. Okay. So I think that's it for all. I think these are the common mistakes, the top 10 common mistakes which every Java developer does. And I myself, at the very initial, I've done this particular mistakes. I've uh, throughout my journey, I've guided many people to avoid this. And this basically, in many organizations there are certain standard documents which clearly says that you have to follow certain principles or certain steps so that you doesn't make that mistakes. Okay. So along with your principles, you try to follow this particular videos. This will be helpful for the newcomer or experienced person who at one particular place they get all this particular top 10 mistakes which a Java developer does. Okay. And also for many of them it will be very important when it comes to interview as well, because in many interviews it has been seen that people ask about what are the common mistakes you have done and also how you can avoid it, right? So I hope this video was helpful to you, and thank you for watching it. And if this video was helpful to you, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and then hit the bell icon. Also share it with the people who this video will be helpful. Thank you.